Hi, Kathy. I can't believe it's the end of the year already.
I know.
We're here ready to talk to your summative conference, and there's a lot to cover, I know, but I was thinking we should start with your student learning objectives.
Okay.
Okay, so I've gone over all of the data that you sent me. I know you said you had some individual student data you wanted to share as well, so that we could determine your rating, but we can go over that together.
Okay.
Okay.
So just as a reminder, I'm sure you've looked at it all. I did my SLO. This SLO is about student spelling scores. I really wanted to make sure that I had a way of using some data to look at student spelling, and I had read some research that student spelling scores will positively impact their reading and writing score, their reading levels as well. So that's why I did this. So what I did was I collected some data, as you can obviously see right there, about my students. I did the PALS test, which is a district level assessment on our students, and that also gave me their reading level, so I could compare their spelling scores and their reading levels.
And you did that right at the beginning of the school year.
Did it right in fall, yeah, in fall. And then I did it for the purposes of my SLO. I did it 3 times. I have 3 pieces of data points here, so fall and then January and spring. Although between the fall and January, I did do the assessments kind of in the middle of that, just to check. I'm in the, as you know, I'm in the inclusion classroom, so I have some students that are struggling, and I really wanted to make sure that the tiers and targets that I had set for those students, that we were right on.
I think I remember too, when we met mid-year, didn't you make an adjustment to your tiers?
I did.
A little bit
Some of those students were not progressing as far along as I thought I wanted them to, so after meeting with the reading teacher and looking at this data some more, we decided that maybe we should adjust those targets a little bit. So, and then I met with you, and we did adjust those targets mid-year just a little bit, just to reflect really what they were doing, and then project out for what they would do by the end of the year. So based on the data that I collected for the year, I think you can see clearly that I exceeded my SLO. What I really wanted, if you looked at my initial targets, I really wanted my students to make sure that they would go up. My highest students would go up at least 3 reading levels, and all of my high students did go up their 3 reading levels. I wanted my middle group of students to go up at least 2 reading levels, and they absolutely did that.
And that was pretty rigorous for those kids.
That was pretty rigorous for those kids. I think so too. The last group was my at-risk kids, some of my inclusion kids, plus a few of my other kids that are in the classroom that are at risk. Those kids did meet the modified target after we revised that target in mid-year. Those students did meet that target. So overall, the rubric says here that all or most of the students met the target. All of my students met their targets. Then it says many students exceed the targets. And most of my students did. The calculation we were using is that at least 85% of the kids would exceed the target, and I had 87% or more. I think it was about 87% that exceeded the target. So I believe that I'm highly effective in this area, that my SLO shows that. If you had any other questions.
No, I actually love the way that you broke this down. It was very easy for me to follow, because I see that you broke this down and you really looked at individual students, because as we talked about at the beginning, sometimes people just think about numbers and percentages, and they forget that the student learning objectives are written about the children that they have in front of them. So I love the way that you broke this down by each child. I can easily see the data that you have here, and you've really summarized by saying at the student level whether they met or exceeded, and I can tell that you really, your students did exceed, and I completely agree that your rating on this SLO will be an exceeded, so I'll make sure that I enter that. And we're going to go on and talk about your math SLO in just a minute, but I just want to make sure that we come back, since this summative conference is really talking about every piece of your evaluation. When we talk about your professional practice, I'd really like us to kind of bring this back and talk about what you did in the classroom. I saw, came into your room several times and collected some great evidence of everything that you were doing. But I want to make sure we don't forget to draw some connections, because obviously what you were doing in the classroom directly impacted the success that your kids had. So
yeah, right. Well, I like data. You know I like data. So I took the data on my students, and the data is supposed to inform instruction. So as I went along, I was looking at this. That's why I had to take those students that were at risk and kind of reassess them in between, because I didn't think that they were going where they wanted to. So looking at that data, that really informed my instruction and helped me really think about other ways of teaching the spelling that would help my students. And one of the other things that I used, which is not really part of this data, but for my professional practice, is the Common Core writing assessment for grade 1. There's a rubric included in the Common Core that I was using with my students. And so I had some writing samples that I used with the students, and I looked at what they were doing in September, and I scored it based on the Common Core rubric, and then I looked at their May and scored that on the Common Core rubric. That supported, this piece of student work supported the evidence that was over here on the data.
All right, great. So can we move on to your math SLO?
Sure.
All right, great. Let's take a look at that.
Okay.